Hey, everybody, welcome back to the show. Today, I'm really excited to have my friends and, in some ways, business partners, Tina and Matt, sharing their story. And their story includes transitioning from corporate America into single family investing and ultimately into multifamily investing. That's a path that probably a lot of folks listening to this want to take. So, good show for you to tune in today. Professional real estate investors know that it's not really about the real estate. In fact, real estate is just a vehicle to freedom. A group of over 100 of the nation's leading real estate investors from across the country meet several times a year at the Investor Fuel Real Estate Mastermind to share ideas on how to strengthen each other's businesses, but also to come together as friends and build more fulfilling lives for all of those around us. On today's show, we're going to continue our conversation of fueling our businesses and fueling our lives. I'm glad you're here. Hey guys, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having us.
Thank you for having us.
Glad to see you guys. So I'm excited to talk about this. Honestly, your story is similar to mine. Corporate America, got into single family investing for really the last 14 years. The past 3 years have been primarily focused on multifamily investing. And so I think that's a common path of people wanting to become more independent. And then we kind of want to go bigger over time, right? Do deals with more zeros behind it. So excited to dive into that today with you guys.
Awesome.
Yeah. So would you mind telling us just a little bit about your backgrounds before we dive in so folks can kind of understand the context of where you came from?
Sure. We both used to work at an IT consulting company here in Wisconsin. And, we did that. Each of us had IT careers over 20 years long. And really, Matt is our visionary. And he thought, how do I get out of this rat race? Kind of what's the next step for us to start building wealth, and really came across real estate. And so he said, let's try this real estate thing. So that really was how we started it. Then we spent some time flailing around trying to figure that out, got in the right circles, and then built a flipping career that got us both out of corporate America. Matt was out in like 15 months, and then I followed 2 years later. It took us 3.5 years to get both of us out of corporate America.
And that was about 7 years ago, just to give some context to that. So that was 2017 is when I left my job. I started doing that full time. So we really enjoyed that. We, like Tina said, we surrounded ourselves with kind of the right people, got into some coaching groups, really understood how to do that. And then about 3 years ago, we really said, this is great, but we kind of created another job for ourselves. So yeah, we may be self-employed, but if we're not flipping, the paychecks stop coming. And so we really wanted to kind of expand upon that and grow. And so we started looking at getting some rentals, single family homes, and really growing like a multifamily portfolio.
That's true. I forgot. We built a single family portfolio first locally.
About 3 years ago, we got our first apartment complexes and started to grow that as well. So.
And then we went, this is pretty cool.
Yeah.
So would you say, because I think about this, I used to kind of say, downplay my corporate background, kind of refer to myself as a corporate refugee. And, a lot of people, it's easy for people these days to say, I could have just skipped that part of my life because it didn't help me at all. And I probably used to say that a little bit more, not those words, but kind of allude to I wish I would have just gotten into real estate sooner, which I think we all do. But there are things that you learn in your background that kind of enable you to do things down the road, right? And as IT sales and consulting, you guys were providing service for people, probably outsourced services, consulting on how people would do things. I mean, it's kind of ingrained to you to find help, right? Whether it's coaching or other things. Would you say that's kind of helped you when you move forward here when you moved into real estate?
Absolutely. I think we actually have this conversation all the time because we did come from the same background and we both transitioned together at that same time. And I don't regret those years because we learned so much there as well. We were huge systems and processes people because we kind of had to be in the industry that we were in. And I think that's really launched our real estate business so much more by having those backgrounds, having the right systems in place, not just kind of shooting from the hip, hoping we can get some houses under contract, but really creating the right systems, having CRM, having the right team around us.
Yeah.
We took those skills out of that and just kind of expanded upon what worked for us.
So much of it translated over, there's a certain discipline, right? When you are going, you have the schedule, you're accountable to other people, you're accountable to things. So I think it's easy when you transition to kind of go, oh, I can wake up whenever I want. I'm not really accountable to anyone. But real quickly, we knew that in order to see success, we needed to keep those same habits in place. And so we really have kept most of those in place.
Yeah. One of the things that I've kind of thought about recently over the past year a fair bit is I worked for some really big companies and they were so screwed up. And I was like, why can't I build that? Like, it's just kind of forced me to like dream bigger. I'm like, man, all the time I'm like, I feel like I'm thinking too small, like I'm dreaming too small, right? Because I've seen companies that are like, my companies run better than I rented a car recently from Hertz. And it was like the whole process was so screwed up. And I find myself thinking about like, why do they do that? Why don't they have this process and stuff? And I'm like, this is a multi-billion-dollar company. Look how screwed up they are. We beat ourselves up over like little things not working right. And we're like, gosh, I'm better than Hertz. And they're way larger than me.
I was just gonna say, that's your brain. You'll do that one where someplace they'll be like, why are they doing it like that? And
yeah.
it's kind of funny.
Yeah.
I agree. And I think we get to be in a position where we get to hold ourselves a little to a higher standard, like I would never put up with that, or I would never want anyone to experience that. Those kinds of experiences you just went through with Hertz.
Right. So when you guys started to move into multifamily, did you start off, because obviously I happen to know because we're partners on a $41 million deal, but when you first got into multifamily, I'm going to use air quotes here, were they big syndications like this, or were they smaller, 4-plexes, 6-plex, 8 units, stuff like that?
No, they were smaller. So our first project was a 22 unit inhabitable building in a D class neighborhood in Kansas City. And
sounds like a beauty.
Yeah.
Right.
We did that adventure with 4 other people, 2 other couples essentially. And it was a really great project and learning experience. And that was a really successful actually endeavor for us. We sold that last year.
Mm-hmm.
And, we made a nice profit on it. And we had, basically we created housing for homeless people. It was a transitional housing home to do that. And we got all the pieces together and then got it all nice and stable, and then sold it to somebody else who was more interested in staying in that neighborhood.
Yeah.
But it was enough for us to go.
Sure. We realized, we really like that. There's a lot of pieces from that we wanted to take away and say, this is it's just another adventure that we can kind of work our way into and do that. So it's kind of funny. We didn't really start small. I guess 22 is all relative, right? 22 units. It was a good chunk to take on. And then from there,
our next one was
88 unit
88
opportunity.
Units. Mm-hmm.
And then we sprinkled in some small ones. We had a 16 unit and another 16, but
48 units.
Kind of been all over the board with those really in the last 3 years, just really looking at opportunities. And I guess my biggest takeaway from that is that it's just more zeros, right? Both doors and opportunities, the money that's involved, but it's all doable if you put your mind to it, I guess.
Sure. And I think I know your answer, but to move to bigger properties, like what are the I guess pros and cons of, because a lot of times, I own Investor Fuel, and people are like, oh, I'm interested in multifamily. I want to get a couple 4-plexes. And we're like, no, we're generally talking about, not that there's anything wrong with doing a 16 unit or a 20 unit, any of that. Right. But at this level, we're generally talking about larger properties that you would syndicate, that have professional management and things like that. And so maybe just talk a little bit about the differences between single family, kind of smaller multifamily, like the ones you just mentioned, and then larger 100+ unit type properties that you've experienced, because you've experienced all of them at this point.
Yeah, I guess, on the single family side, we were already flipping. And what we then started doing is cherry picking some of those houses and say, I think this would make a really good rental. Tina and I did self-manage the first handful of houses that we did. I guess that's my number one advice to anybody is
don't do that.
Bad idea. We weren't cut out for it. I mean, there's a million lessons to be learned there. I think you could argue that everyone should maybe put their hand in it for a little bit to understand that it's a complex process, right? At the end of the day, the number one reason why Tina and I did not want to self-manage anymore is there's a lot of law, right? You want to make sure you're aware of all the tenant landlord laws that are out there, and it's just that can become a full-time job.
Sure.
And it's very regional what those are.
Sure, you got to understand all of your state laws, your federal laws, state laws, local laws, all of that.
Yeah. And generally getting
there's nothing
harder
wrong with
and
that.
generally not in the favor of the landlord, right?
Right, exactly. So you have to
Increasingly
really
getting
understand your
harder.
position, how to vet tenants and all that stuff. So
Yeah.
moving on from there, we did bring in some property management and realized that was the best thing that we could do with, with that, and really focus more on acquisition and kind of get away from that. So I think, to answer the other part of your question is, there's absolutely nothing wrong with starting with some small projects, right? A duplex, a fourplex. There's also the understanding of you don't know what you don't know. And so if you want to get into something like this, I would recommend start with a duplex or a fourplex, because you're going to learn at a smaller scale all the things you don't know. And then once you start to learn those and realize that, by all means you can scale, not to scare anybody away, but on big projects, mistakes can be big dollars, right? And on smaller projects, you can learn a little bit easier. So.
Yep. And some of the pros of the larger ones are essentially like on a single family, as you guys know, a lot of people, you self-managed. I don't know if you guys ever did any of your own rehabbing or anything like that. I mean, some kind of are way more hands-on, right? With a large multifamily, there's just no way you could be hands-on. It kind of forces you to outsource almost everything, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And then talk a little about the differences in management, because with large syndications, you're obviously dealing with generally large national or regional management companies, and not necessarily a husband and wife team that, might not be together forever or things. Those are some of my experiences. One time we hired a husband and wife team, and then like 3 months later they're getting divorced, and we're like, oh my God, what does this mean for us?
Well, I would say property management as a whole, you could do tons of shows, I guess, on that. I think it's important to make sure you have the right management for your property, right? So like you were saying that, right? You can't use a mom and pop property management to manage the big ones. But we actually made the mistake the other way. We had a big one come in to do a 48 unit, and it was also disastrous for us. So we had to switch gears and bring in the right property management. And then we've really been trying to make sure that our skills are so much better in how to manage the manager, right? Like to make sure that we're having the dialogue and the frequency that's needed with the data that's needed to be shared, so that all of our assets are getting managed appropriately. On the bigger scale, some of these big deals that we're in, those conversations are happening weekly with the leasing piece of it, and then bi-weekly on the renovation piece of it. And, we're getting data and reports on a weekly basis on all of that.
Yep. And they have the resources to do that, right? I think when you play at a smaller level, there's just not enough money in it for a manager or whatever to like provide a ton of reporting or real-time stuff. They're just not scaled up to the way that it is with a large multifamily, right?
Yeah. And honestly, the other thing we learned transitioning into bigger stuff is there's what we call the suck zone, where you've got a big property that needs attention, but not big enough to financially justify having full-time staff. We've kind of found that number, somewhere between 50 and 100. It's really hard to cash flow the numbers you need to have full-time staff there. And so we have a few of those properties that don't have full-time staff on site, and they require a little bit more management just because of the size of them. And so for us, that really changed our buy box. And that was one of the reasons we grew our multifamily now to say, we're really not going to look at anything less than 100 doors. Because then I know we can afford the right, obviously you got to run your numbers and make sure things work, but you can afford the full-time staff that is dedicated to that property and pairs well with also your property management, who really can manage that staff. So,
yeah, for sure. So can you guys talk a little bit about that transition? Obviously you've explained it here a little bit. It was like, it's a stair-step approach, right? You tried this and then you moved on and you moved on. But what kind of guidance would you give people about moving in to multifamily? And let's even talk a little bit about the difference between a GP and an LP, because a lot of folks can play in that space and have like no role, no kind of management role at all. They're just completely passive, right? But maybe just talk about the transition, and then we can come back to the difference between a GP and an LP.
Sure. So early on, when we were growing our flip business, we have a guide that we judge ourselves on is how uncomfortable were we. And we knew if we weren't uncomfortable enough, we weren't making enough progress in our business, right? And so then, we built this business and it was successful and meeting our needs. And then we decided to do multifamily, and we went, we know real estate. We'll just change, we'll just do this multifamily thing. And what we didn't realize is it's really a different animal. And so we had to get real uncomfortable again to start building our multifamily business, and then to figure out what roles, we needed to be in. And we kind of were flailing around in that for a while. Like, we were buying things here or there. But then we went, we have to be in the right community to learn what we didn't know. And then that's been a huge drastic difference for us.
Yeah, we talk about that a lot. In our flip business, we kind of dabbled in that a little bit for about a year. And then we got with the right group and really got some good coaching and gave us some direction. And that allowed us to really fast track the learning curve, the discipline, the accountability. And it really launched that business for us. When we started doing multifamily, Tina and I were, like she mentioned, we know real estate, we can kind of figure this out. And very quickly we went, well, what are we thinking here? It's a whole different industry. Right. And we knew what worked for us on the flipping side. So we said, we need to find a community. We need to reach out and find somebody that can coach, mentor, hold us accountable, and how to build that business the right way. And so we did that about a year and a half ago. And it's the same thing. It's really launching that business as well.
And the GPLP thing, we didn't know that before we joined into the group, because we just structured our deals so much differently.
Sure.
To understand that there's really two sides of ownership, and it's the people that are actively managing that property in the GP role versus the limited partner role of people who are letting their money work for them and kind of stay hands off and just cash their checks, right?
Yep. Yeah. Simply investing in the deals, like the LPs. I mean, my first deal that I invested in, which was with Corey Peterson, I was just an LP, and I didn't have a role at all. I never even visited the property. I just got checks, and that was that. Right. And so I think that's, a lot of people don't quite understand that yet, especially if they're talking about getting started in real estate investing. It's like, hey, one of the best ways to do it is just be at a distance, and you can kind of, the LPs are not all that involved in the day to day, but you can kind of learn a little bit how the process works. What are they doing to improve the property, to add value, and things like that. So it's like being a grandparent versus a parent, right? You don't, at any point you can just like, I'm kind of interested in what's going on over there, but you can just walk out. Like, you don't really have to be there, right?
Exactly.
That's a great analogy.
It is.
Yeah. So, let's talk a little bit about the team-based nature of multifamily versus single family, because on the single family side, some of us did very well in that space. I flipped hundreds of houses, and it served me well, made way more money than I would have in corporate America for sure. But we were wearing every hat: marketing, sales, managing contractors, raising money, like whatever, like everything. We have to kind of play that role, largely because the business isn't like scaled up a ton, right? I mean, it's hard to hit that high level of scale, although some do. But even though we were doing 70 houses a year or so, we weren't scaled up enough to have a huge team of people to do everything, right? But multifamily is very different, right?
Well, one of the biggest things for us is we're in a small market. Like we market to 5 counties, and our whole population is 500,000.
Yeah.
And so our scalability in single family is really pretty limited. Period. Like there's just. I think it's pretty small. But multifamily, we actually don't own anything locally. We own some stuff in the state 4 hours away, and then really we're in 7 different states right now. So that's like one thing, and it was a huge door that opened for us, so we didn't have to be so limited by our market. Sure. But you're right, we had to figure out how to be a team, because locally it was just really Matt and I and an assistant, and we did wear all the hats to manage all the pieces. In this part, really you find the right team and go, this is the role I can play, and trust that the rest of the team is going to do the roles of the hats they're wearing, and pull that all together.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's another really cool thing about multifamily, is that you do need to kind of put together a team. I think there's some key roles there. You've got someone who's got to find deals, right, and vet them. You've got to find someone who's a key principal, means someone that can kind of back that loan. You got to find someone that can go raise money, and you can be all of those pieces, or you can find a team to put together that can do that together.
Yeah.
this way, if you're really good at finding deals, you partner up with somebody who understands how to raise money, and you can really launch that business that way. For anyone who wants to get into multifamily, if you say, hey, I'm a great fit for one of those roles or any of those roles, you can really partner with other people, team up with them, and create a good business that way as well. So
yeah, and the cool thing is it's often other like fellow investors, right? It's not like you find necessarily an acquisitions person or whatever to find deals. A lot of times it's just an investor that wants to get into the space. They happen to be really good at that part of it, and they're like, I'll do this, you do that. Probably everybody's helping raise money because it takes a village to do that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's such a cool thing.
You're right. I mean, it's other investors. And it's also per deal. Like in the flip space, if you're going to bring on a partner, it's more of a marriage versus just dating.
Right. Yeah. More of a deal partner than a necessarily a overall business partner, right? So if it's not a great relationship, they don't have to be involved in the next deal, or you don't have to be involved in the next deal.
Right. Exactly. But the team, there's that team too. And then there's, making sure you have the right property management, and the right lawyer is super important. And all of this, having all the right legal representation has been, critical in this deal that we're doing right now. Having the right lawyer really helped negotiate when we went to retrade. He got us a lot of money off on our original offer price. So that's been good. And then the right construction crew. I mean, that's true across all of them, but having a construction crew is pretty key too.
I always think about the team. I mentioned those can raise money and all that, but really it's a team sport all the way across the board, right? Having the right property management, the right construction crews, the right legal team, the right closing and title and all of that. Really no different, I suppose, than the flipping world, but understanding who you need around you, how to surround yourself with those people to really be successful is also part of building that team. So
Yep. In terms of surrounding yourself, and you guys have talked about this a little bit, of coaching and making sure you're around the right people. Like, you guys are obviously part of the Investor Fuel Mastermind, and a lot of people that are listening to this right now might not know that even though Investor Fuel has been around for coming up on 5 years, it was really just about a year ago that we started the we call it the cash flow group, but it's effectively multifamily investor groups. And I partnered with Corey Peterson on that, and now Georgia Brew. We got a lot of amazing people in there, but maybe just talk a little bit about, would you mind just giving a quick kind of testimonial of Investor Fuel from the multifamily side and kind of the impact it's had on your business?
Sure. Absolutely. You want to go first?
Yeah.
I'll do my 2 cents.
It's been amazing. It really goes back to what I was just saying. Tina and I thought for a short period of time that we could kind of do this on our own, and very quickly realized we don't know what we don't know, and we need to surround ourselves with the right people. We actually reached out and tried to find those communities, and Tina had heard about Corey Peterson and looked up his group, and we really kind of vetted him and said, this is the group we need to be in. And so we joined just about almost a year and a half ago, and that has made such a difference for us. The entire Investor Fuel family has been amazing. If we have questions, we know exactly who to reach out to. I mean, we've got coaching calls, we call them, twice a month. We do deal days where we pitch deals and see, is it a deal or no deal? We can reach out to Corey or George anytime with questions we have. Even as simple as saying, hey, I need a lawyer for this. What are the questions to even ask, to find the right people? And that community has always been there to kind of help guide us in the right direction. So,
and I would just say that, we've been part of other environments. And so coming into Investor Fuel, it was a whole new experience for us. And we love it. We love that it's different than everything we've ever been in. I love that at the beginning of every meeting, you talk about like the rules of engagement, which is leave your ego at the door. We're all here to learn from each other. And I love that mentality, the recognizing the biggest givers into the groups, because I think that's just so important, that's the mindset we come into, is like, how do we help others? And we have obviously the great coaching people right from the front of the room, but the connections we've made in the room have been invaluable as well. And, we do every Friday morning, whoever wants to join our call, and just our group will join on, and we'll talk about deals that we're working or a challenge that we have, and with just, people that are in that room. And so that's been really rewarding and obviously helpful for us.
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome. Yeah. I would say, we're unique in that it's not coaching per se. It's more peer to peer and a network of people trying to help each other, lift each other up. And in the multifamily side, of course, do deals together even, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. That's awesome. Well, we appreciate you guys a ton. If folks want to connect with you, obviously you're always looking for people to invest in your deals. You're always looking for additional deals to do. How do they connect with you?
Our company is Smart Investing, and our website is smartinvestingllc.com, or obviously Facebook.
Okay.
Make sure you spell Matt's name out.
Yeah, we'll spell it out. I won't even read it off right now because somebody's going to get in a car accident trying to scribble it down while they're driving. So don't do that, everybody. We'll put links down below in the show notes for your company and your Facebook profile. So I appreciate you guys a ton. Thanks for joining us today. Thanks for sharing your story.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Awesome. And everybody, thanks for joining us today. If any of this resonated with you and you're interested in checking out Investor Fuel, whether you're a single family investor or whether you're a multifamily investor or whether you're somewhere in between making the transition, we'd love to talk to you. You can go to investorfuel.com to learn more, and we'll see you on the next show. Are you an active real estate investor? If so, and you want to latch on to the power of surrounding yourself with over 100 of the nation's leading real estate investors, all committed to building stronger businesses and living richer, fuller lives, you should jump on a call with us to learn more about Investor Fuel. Simply visit investorfuel.com to get started.